Hello and welcome to this lecture about overview of Constitution by Wisdom Mitra, a friend in your pursuit of wisdom. This lecture is focused on how and what of formulation of Constitution. That is, when was Constitution formulated? What was Constituent Assembly? What are the important points about Constituent Assembly? What are the sources of Constitution? And then followed by important articles and parts in the Constitution, and then followed by list of schedules. This lecture would be useful and handy for anyone who is preparing for competitive exams like UPSC or any other public service or government exams. Let us delve into the lecture. So, what is formulation of constitution? When was constitution made? So, to begin with, the idea of constituent assembly, that is an assembly, a committee that should create constitution, was given by Mr. M. N. Roy back in 1934, much before independence. And effectively, Constituent Assembly was set up under Cabinet Mission Plan, and its first meeting took place on 9th December 1946. And Dr. Sachidanand Sinha was the interim president. He was the eldest member of Constituent Assembly. But effectively, on 11th December 1946, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was elected as president. This Constituent Assembly had 13 committees for framing of constitution. For example, there was committee on rules of procedure. There was a steering committee. There was finance and staff committee, and these were headed by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Similarly, there was Union Constitution Committee. There was Union Powers Committee, States Committee, and these were chaired by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So yeah, there were multiple committees that were helping and deciding on formulation of constitution. The most important one of those was drafting committee, which was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the first law minister of the country. So the constitution, it was passed and accepted on 26th of November. Some provisions like citizenship, elections, etc. were given immediate effect, and the constitution was declared as passed on this date. But it came into effect a few days later on 26 January 1950. This date was chosen because it was on 26 January when the first declaration or demand for Purna Swaraj was made. The total number members of assembly were to be 389, but after partition of India, the number of members came down to 299, of whom 284 signed the constitution on 26th of November 1949. So this is an overview of making of constitution, the Constituent Assembly. And the most important committee, which is drafting committee, it was chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, as I pointed out just now. It had members, and those names are listed over here for your referral and use. Say Mr. N. Gopal Swami Iyengar, Alade Krishna Iyer, Dr. K. M. Munshi, so on and so forth. A few dates, facts related to Constituent Assembly. So the flag was adopted on 26 July 1947. Its designer was Pingali Venkaiah. The national anthem was adopted on 24th January 1950. State emblem was adopted on 26 January 1950. And one or two more fun facts. So the first person to sign the constitution was Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and the last person to sign the constitution was Mr. Feroz Gandhi. Let us delve into the next thing, that is the sources of constitution. So as the Constituent Assembly spent near about 3 years to formulate this constitution, but it took inspiration ideas from multiple sources, and here is the list. The first and foremost source of constitution was Government of India Act 1935, for sure. There were many acts, many parts, etc., or say articles that have been retained from the Government of India Act 1935. But as far as the point of like what's the source of which part or which idea of constitution that can be looked over here, seen over here. So the lawmaking procedure, rule of law, single citizenship, bicameral parliamentary system. Bicameral means having a Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and office of Comptroller Auditor General. These ideas have been taken from Constitution of Britain. So, for example, USA does not have a single citizenship. It has a dual citizenship of the whole country as well as the state to which you belong to. But India did not adopt that idea, even though it was much bigger compared to Britain. It adopted the idea of single citizenship. And from Constitution of USA, the fundamental rights, these were the biggest, source. So, in the sense that the fundamental rights were taken from the Constitution of USA, the idea. Similarly, the independence of judiciary, judicial review, removal procedure for Supreme Court and High Court judges, the preamble, the functions of president and vice president, these ideas were picked up from the Constitution of USA. So, this idea of judicial review is really, really strong in USA, and that idea has been adopted in our Constitution as well. Coming to Canada, the federation with a strong center, residuary powers going to center, Supreme Court's advisory jurisdiction, that is Supreme Court's power to advise President of India when he or she asks for any judicial advice. These ideas have been taken from Constitution of Canada. Coming to Ireland, directive principles of state policy, method of presidential elections, nomination of members to Rajya Sabha by President. This idea has been taken from Ireland. Suspension of fundamental rights during emergency. This idea has been taken from Constitution of Germany, the Weimar Constitution. Concurrent laws, trade, commerce provisions. These have been taken from Australia. Constitution of South Africa has been source for the idea of amendment needing two-third majority, Rajya Sabha membership selection on the basis of proportional representation across states. So, for example, again coming back to USA, its states have equal representation irrespective of their size in their upper house. But here in India, that is not so. It's proportionate to their size. And that idea has been taken from Constitution of South Africa. Coming to France, the republican system, the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity have been taken from the Constitution of France. For example, Constitution of Britain does not have a republican system. Their head of the state is not an elected member. Rather, the king or the queen, the monarch, they are the head of the state. But in India, that's not the case, and that idea has been picked up from the Constitution of France. From the USSR, fundamental duties have been taken up. And remind you, fundamental duties were not added at the beginning of Constitution. They were added much later during the 42nd Amendment Act. Here is a quick list of parts and articles of the Constitution which might help you to get an overview of the Constitution. So, it's a good idea to understand the layout of Constitution, why each part has been put where it is, and is there a logic to it? And for sure, there seems to be a logic. For example, the introduction of Constitution, that that is nothing but preamble. What is this Constitution meant for? What are the objectives of this Constitution? And once you define the objective, define the introduction, what you would do, you would define what is India, what are its territories, how big it is, from east to west, from north to south. And that has been declared and defined in the part one. Once you define your country, once you define the territories of your country, what next? Who are its citizens who are allowed to be taking part in this wonderful idea of India? And that has been explained in part two. Once you declare who are the citizens, then what? Their rights. So if you're a citizen, what are your rights? That has been declared in part 3. And part 3 is considered to be one of the most important topic for any competitive exam. Then what? Part 4 describes how those fundamental rights should be, say, like how should the government be directed to implement those fundamental rights as well as other requirements of governance. And once you do that, again, the fundamental duties. So those who have rights, they have certain duties as well. And that has been described in part 4a. Now look at this. Part 4a is nothing but, the part has been followed by an alphabet. And this clearly indicates that it was probably not available initially. And that's true. The part A, that is part 4a, that is, fundamental duties, they were added much more later, um, through an amendment. And the those who added that those duties, they felt that it is really important to have them along with fundamental rights and directive principles, and that's why a new part has been added, and it's has been named with a suffix and added. Whereas it did not go as say part 23 or something like that, right? Or and this is one clear indicator whenever you see a article or a part that has a suffix, an alphabet behind it, in all possibility, that means that it has been added through an amendment, through a change to the constitution at later stages. Anyway, coming back to here, so once you define your rights, directive principles, and duties, what next? You define what is your center, or who all would be the dignitaries who would be governing. So, for example, Article 52 talks about president. Again, the from 52 to 150, when there are multiple articles that talk about prime minister, they talk about cabinet. For example, Article 124, it talks about Supreme Court, for example, right? So these are the different articles that are focused on the union, the central government. And what after union? States. So 152 to 237, they describe about states. About governor, about chief minister, about legislative assemblies, about high courts, so on and so forth. And similarly, Part 7 about states in Part B of first schedule, uh, 239 to 242 about union territories, then panchayats, then municipalities. Again, if you see, the articles that are in Part 8 and 9th, and 10A and 10B, these were added by later amendments during the time of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, and that is why these have been added with a suffix. And why they have been added over here only? Because it is a logical sequence, right? After union, then comes state, after states come union territories, after union territories, panchayats, municipalities, cooperative societies, so on and so forth, right? So, these are most important parts. Then relationship between union and state, finance, property, contracts, suits, trade and commerce, tribunals. Again, part 15, that is 324 to 329 in elections. This again is a very important part, very important bunch of articles, and they are usually asked in multiple competitive exams. So, for example, 324 is about election commission. 326 is about universal adult franchise. So these are like really important articles. Similarly, articles 352 to 360, emergency provisions, really important articles. They talk about what is national emergency, what is state emergency, that is presidential rule, method of formulation of, method of establishment of a emergency, so on and so forth. Similarly, Article 368 about amendment of constitution is also really important. Describes how amendment should be done, so on and so forth. Um, so this is kind of an indicative list. Again, I mean, you have to delve deeper into each article to understand what is what. So, for example, fundamental rights, starting Article 12 to 35, each fundamental right has been bunched into multiple articles. What do they mean? What is Article 12? What is the definition of state? These are, ideas, thoughts that we would delve deeper whenever we get into the lecture of specific topics. But this overview is kind of helps you to understand what is the layout of the constitution, how it started, where it started, and where it ended. Let us go into the next topic about parts and articles of constitution that they were originally available, as well as the current numbers. So in terms of the number of articles, originally constitution had 395 articles, but as of now they have become almost 450. So there were multiple articles that were added subsequently, almost 55 articles. And if you see over here, those articles are over here mostly, right? I mean, with a suffix over here, 51A. Similarly, um, 300A, right to property, it was added later. In terms of schedules, there were originally only 8 schedules, but 4 more were added as and when time passed. When we go into the topic of schedules, I would get there, and even the number of parts have been increased from 22 to 24. So this kind of gives you an idea about how much constitution have been modified, changed, and how many amendments have been made, right? By the way, in terms of the number of amendments, almost 105 amendments have been made in last 75, 76 years of independence. I'll give you a quick overview of different parts and articles. Kind of helps you to remember them, and it might be an important topic. It might help you to you know answer certain questions when they are asked about, like, what does this article concerns about, so on and so forth. And what you have to remember is that look at the topic of the article and try and understand where would it fall, which part would it fall. For example, when I say amendment, obviously it cannot come in part 1 or 2, as we saw, because part 1 talks about, say, union and its territories, right? Part 2 talks about citizenship. Say part 3 talks about fundamental rights, as we saw just now, right? So probably amendment won't come there. So if someone says article 15 talks about amendment, you have to take a note. No, no, article 368 probably talks about amendment much later, right? So that kind of gives you an overview. So let us go into parts. So most important part is part 3. It concerns about the fundamental rights. And at the beginning of constitution we had 7 fundamental rights, but those have been reduced to 6. The one fundamental right, right to property, has been removed from this list during 44th amendment, and it has been moved to as article 300A, and it's just a legal right as of now. It's not a fundamental right. And constitution has granted us 6 fundamental rights: right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, and right to constitutional remedies. And how do we remember this? Probably it's simple. What you can remember is equality, freedom, and exploitation, EFE. And then comes religion and culture. So they get bundled together, religion and culture. So that's how you can remember EFE, then a religion, culture, RC, and then remedies, constitutional remedies, that is improvements, or like whenever these fundamental rights are being impacted, those are supposed to be fought against, and that's nothing but constitutional remedies for safeguarding your fundamental rights. Coming to part 4. So part 3 is about fundamental rights. We would discuss it under a separate lecture. It's quite an important topic. Part 4 focuses on directive principles, and most important ones are like 339A. Again, if you look at a suffix, you understand that it has been added later. At equal justice and free legal aid, Article 44 Uniform Civil Code, 48A Safeguarding of Forest and Wildlife. So these articles under directive principles, part 4, are like really important. and you're supposed to remember these. Under Part 5, some important articles have been mentioned here. 52 is about the President of India, 54 is about election of President, 72 is pardoning power of the President, 76 about Attorney General, 78 about duties of PM, that is Prime Minister, as respect to furnishing of information, etc. Right. And these are also important. 110, 112. Money bill is, a different kind of bill. We'll discuss this when we go into parliamentary procedures, but as of now, you can remember definition of money bill is under Article 110, and then under Article 112, budget is presented. The one that's presented in February every year. That is on account of Article 112, and 123 is about ordinances by President. 124 is about establishment and constitution of Supreme Court. 148 is about Comptroller Auditor General of India. And if you see part 6, you can draw a parallel. Just add 100 or like 101 or in some cases 90, and you'll get a similar, article concerning to the state. So, for example, 52 is President of India and 153 is Governor. Similarly, 72 is pardoning power of President, 161 is pardoning power of Governor. Similarly, Article 214 is about high courts for states, and 226, this is an important article, power of high courts to issue certain writs. Um, Let me go a bit further. Other important articles that you can remember. Article 280 is about Finance Commission. 300A, right to property. As I pointed out, right to property was earlier a fundamental right, but it has been moved out and it has been added as a new article. 312 is about All India Services, Public Service Commission, Union, States, etc. 324 Election Commission, 326 Universal Adult Suffrage, Emergency, 352, 56, and 360. And just to remind you, 352 have been implemented very few times. As far as I remember, it's just three, right? Whereas 356, that is state emergency, almost 100 plus times. And 360 never ever till now. So we'll discuss this when we go into emergency, but you can remember 352, 56, and 60 are like most important. 368 is about power of parliament to amend the constitution. Uh, what's the procedure for amending a constitution have been explained here. 370 is about temporary provisions for J&K, and this has been abrogated recently. I hope you all know that. Coming to the schedules. So what are schedules? Schedules are kind of addendums or appendix of the constitution, right? They kind of discuss and explain a few points and topics. So for example, if you see first schedule, it talks about what all states are there, and what all union territories are there, what is territorial jurisdiction of each state, etc. Right. So, the layout of state. Similarly, second schedule talks about allowances, emoluments, privileges of different dignitaries, may it be PM, may it be, Supreme Court judges, or president, etc. Forms of oath of different dignitaries. So, these are kind of appendices. These are kind of, additional things which are important, but, they are not really lawmaking elements. So those have been separated out and put as schedules. And the most important ones, if you notice, are these ones which you should remember. The first one, for example, state and union territories. Similarly, the seventh one, this deals with the three lists: union list, state list, and concurrent list. That is, center is responsible for which topics, state is responsible for which topics, and which topics are the dual responsibility, that is responsibility of both center and state. For example, education, right? It's a responsibility of both. Say military, it's responsibility of the center. So on and so forth. Schedule 8, it talks about the official languages. Schedule 9, the list of center and state laws that cannot be challenged in courts. And then Schedule 10, it's about defection. If a particular member of parliament doesn't follow his or her party line, um, that's called as defection, and this has been added much more later. Uh, during the time of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi again, yeah, and that's defection related. So we'll discuss that when we go there. Similarly, part 11 and 12, they are about panchayat and municipalities. So these are schedules, the appendices that are, uh, taken as a few important points that are supposed to be known. And what uh, with this lecture, what I wanted to convey or cover was that what's the layout of constitution, how it got formulated, what are its sources, and what are the important articles and parts and schedules that you should know about. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the lecture. Looking forward to you about open to your feedback, and would look forward if you send across any emails in terms of feedback, as well as if you have any new batch inquiry, drop an email here, we'll get back to you. Thank you.